Hello and welcome once again to Painting with Cipriano, founded part of the Longmont Museum. And tonight we're going to be doing another painting, and as you can see it's going to be called Pink Orchids. And this one is fairly straightforward, like the one last time. And as you can see, we have a black background. All right, and thank you all for joining me this evening. And do keep in mind that we have a 30-second delay, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat and I will answer them, but do keep in mind there's a 30-second delay, but I will definitely answer your questions. So, to get started here, we have our pre-gessoed canvas all ready to go. We have a palette, which in my case is a piece of glass, but you can use a piece of paper, a paper plate, or whatever you see fit. We have the colors tonight are going to be acrylic paints. We have a yellow, a red, a green, and a tinting agent which is black and white as well too. We have 3 brushes tonight. We have a small brush, a medium chisel brush, and a larger chisel brush. You don't necessarily need the larger chisel brush, but it does help in executing the black background. As you can see, this whole thing will need to be painted black. And we'll get to that in a second here. I have a container of water to wash out my brushes. I also have water for drinking. I have a blow dryer to speed along the drying process. And that is pretty much what we need for tonight. So, we also have a roll of paper towels, but you can also use a rag. Feel free to wear an apron as well too. I just like to get messy with paints. So, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our large brush and we're going to wet it with some pure water, and we are going to coat the entire canvas here with water. And you may be wondering why that is the case. It is easier for the black to cling on to a wet canvas than a dry one, and it will help speed along the movement of our black paint onto our canvas. As I mentioned before, with this composition entitled Pink Orchids, our background is indeed a pure black, which gives a wonderful contrast to those light pinks and reds of the flowers themselves. Once again, if you're just joining us, my name is Cipriano Ortega. This is Longmont Sipping and Painting, funded by the museum, and we're going to be doing Pink Orchids tonight. So, 30-second delay if you have any questions. So, put my big brush down. I'm going to get my pure black, and I'm going to put this on my palette. And I'm just going to take the cap off because it's a little bit easier. We need a good amount of black for our background here. Such joyous sounds with the paint coming out. All right, so that I probably will need more, but that's a good amount to start off with. I'll take my pre-wet big brush here, and take note of this. So whatever direction you put your brush into, that is obviously the direction that it's going to go into. So I want a nice horizontal line for this background, but if I paint it all crazily, any direction goes, it'll get more abstract. For me, personally, for this piece, I just like a nice horizontal, consistent line, and I shall demonstrate that here in a moment. So just like so, just across our canvas, and you can see how easily that black spreads across the canvas simply because our canvas is wet. So that allows us to move this black much easier than if it was to be a dry canvas. One of the little tricks that I discovered when I was painting this a while back. Just helps the black move around a lot quicker, and you can see I'm already covering a huge amount of surface area with this trick. We'll probably need to do at least 2 coats for it to be a true black, but we have plenty of time to do so. Just spreading that back and forth in a consistent horizontal line. You can obviously go vertical as well too, but I think for this composition going horizontal is indeed a better approach. Go back and forth, nice and consistently. Spreading that black paint around, making sure there's no clumps or large masses of paint that need to be moved. That is not the type of painting we're doing today, although that is a valid approach. If you take a look at the oil paintings by the Expressionists, such as Van Gogh and Monet, you will very much see they used a very thick amount of oil paint. And oil paints, unlike acrylic paints, take quite a long time to dry. Acrylics are a type of plastic, so they dry much quicker. Oils can take, I've heard, up to months to dry, if not longer. I've never really worked with oils, but so the legend goes. Okay, as you can see, nice consistent black, and I'm surprised a little amount of black goes a long way, so do keep that in mind here. Get those edges, and for this I think to cover the edges is a good trick here as well to do for a nice good composition. So I think for now I'm going to take my blow dryer and I'm going to blow dry this first coat, and you are welcome to do so as well too. Another old-fashioned way, if you do not have a blow dryer, to hasten the process of speeding this dry process along is the good old fan trick. Okay, but I personally prefer modern technology. Work smarter, not harder, as I say. And we're going to use the blow dryer, and I will mute my microphone so you won't have to hear such glorious sounds coming from the blow dryer. Doesn't need to be completely dry, just enough to be tacky for the second coat to be applied. And once again, I take my brush full of black paint, and I'm going to do this second coat. Okay, pure black. You're welcome to use different colors, of course. It is your painting. It is your world to create. But I prefer to, obviously I need to stick to the original composition, but you can venture off into other colorscapes if you wish. This is merely an interpretation of nature. And that first coat spread much easier because it was more wet, but that was to get the general application of the black. Now this second coat is going to take a little bit more diligence to spread because it is indeed thicker. Right. And do take note that once you get to the edge of the canvas, your paints can splatter, so do take care of that. Or just be mindful, I should say. Moving that black across there. Nice and consistent horizontal direction. And you'll see visually, and you'll feel also with your brush where that black needs to go. Okay. I'll hold this tip so I don't make it topple over. The more loose with your wrist, the more agile your brush becomes. There, I think that looks nice and consistent. Consistency is key with this first initial step. I step back to take a look at my masterpiece. So now to get the edges. Same process, but just grab the back of your canvas and coat those edges. And for the bottom edge, we're going to have to obviously dry this top one and go to do the bottom one as well too. So I'm grabbing the back of it if you don't want to get your hand full of black paint. I'm just painting that edge there. Okay. Getting black again. And painting this edge here. There we go. So now once again, we are going to use our blow dryer here and blow dry this second coat. And you want to really make sure that this is completely dry. Then we're going to paint the bottom edge and then we'll start with the orchids. But make sure that this second coat is completely dry. I don't believe we need to put a third one, but if you feel like you do need to put a third one, then obviously go ahead and do so. But I think 2 coats is suitable. Alright, as you can see, acrylic paint dries very quickly. We're just going to flip this to the top here. On the bottom is going to be the top now. We're just going to paint this edge because we want the canvas to be covered in black on every edge here of the canvas, just to make the composition look professional. Right, once again, we can go ahead and put our black brush into our jar of water or container of water here. I'm going to blow dry this once again. Make sure it's completely dry, like I said. And as you could see, what I was doing is just testing to see with the touch if it was dry. I'm going to flip it back to the direction that it was initially, just because I like to keep consistent with that. Dry off my hand here. Need to grab myself some paper towel to have just in case I need to dry off one of my brushes. All right, so our canvas now, as you can see, is completely black. The next section or next part we're going to do is we're going to start laying down our branches first, or our stems of our orchid, as you can see. So for that, I'm going to need some white, and I'm going to grab some of my white with my palette knife here. Pure white onto my palette here. Put this down. Get some of my green. I'm going to put that separate to the white. Shake this up a bit. A good amount of green as well on your palette, as you can see. And our white and our green here. And I'm going to take my small brush, right? My small brush here. And I'm going to take my green, make a little section of my green, and we're going to mix a light green. So to do that, we need a good amount of white and a little bit of green. We're going to make a nice light green first for our initial base of our stems for our pink orchids. This will be the base coat of our stems. Like I said, a nice light green. Okay, so just you can see here, it's a nice light green. It's going to be mixed for our stem. And we're going to take a look. Our stem starts a little bit to our left, off center, left-hand side. And I'm just going to start with the initial one that travels from the left kind of all the way to the right corner. So to do that consistently with the brush can be a bit challenging. So you're going to load up your brush with a good amount of light green here. And we're just going to start like so. So nice and gentle. And go as far as you can until the brush runs out of paint. All right? Just keep it nice and loose. And if you're seeing there's thinner areas, that's okay. We're just going to do a nice, loose, squiggly line. And yes, that's a professional term, squiggly line. And just nice, as thin as you can line for the first initial stem of our orchids, right? Secondary one is going to be stemming from the midpoint here, going a bit pretty much straight up almost to the left again. And I'm just going to look at my original here. And you'll notice I chose to make them green and the original is yellow. But I think it's more suitable for green because I was looking at orchids the other day. They're definitely green stems. We're going to add some yellow in there as well too, but just wanted to make that a bit more interesting, a bit more accurate to nature. Right, third stem branching from center point to the left again. I like to think of stems as veins of our orchid here. So just nice, confident lines, as you can see. And with that black and green, it makes it really pop out, especially on camera here. Right. Now for another branch that stems out here from the center of this V. Just like so. Nice curves of the brush. Nice, simple execution here. Another one there. Thick and thin. Don't worry if it is a bit inconsistent, because that is the whole point of different thicknesses and widths of our brush to convey different parts of this. So for this stem right here, the one that's to your left, the second one, the higher one I should say, do two other branching stems from that point. And then, let's see, for the one over here, to your far right, same thing. Just two sticking out there. Right? Yes, that looks quite good, I think. And you can feel free to make the stems any which way you'd like, but I like to keep it consistent to the original. Only difference is ours is green. The original is yellow. You, of course, can use yellow just mix your white and yellow together, making a light yellow. And we will do that in a minute here, because I want to accent that. But first, we're going to, you guessed it, blow dry it again. All right, so now we're going to get some of our yellow here. Shake it up a bit. Put some of this yellow next to our green on our palette. Just a little bit, because we don't need too much for this area, because these will just be for the stems for now. Rinse out our small brush. Make sure it's good and clean from the green. Take your rag and clean it off. If it needs to be cleaned again, obviously feel free to do so. We're going to mix a light yellow. Some of our yellow here. Get some of our white. I'm going to mix a nice light yellow, as you can see here. But for this one, I don't really want to load up the brush too much. So I'm going to wipe off a good majority of my yellow from my small brush after mixing our light yellow. And we're just going to dash in some of our yellow like so. So just pick any area you want on the stems and just lightly complement one side of your stem here. Just follow the same line. Very light amount of yellow on your brush for the stems themselves. And you'll see that makes it look very much more interesting. Just to have a little bit of a contrast of our yellow. Even if they don't follow the green line completely, I think it just makes it look a bit more artistic. And if you don't like, if there's a huge chunk of yellow that you see on your stem, just move it around. Painter likes to move. So just like so. Nice light yellow, accenting our green stem that we already initially put on there. Excellent. So, if you don't like how heavy that yellow is, we're going to do something again to our stems here. Okay. So wash out your little brush, your small brush again. We're going to take our pure white. No, we're not going to blow dry this time because we want some of that pure white to mix into that yellow. We're just going to take a little bit of our white on our small brush and just dash some of that pure white into our stems. And you'll see how that makes the stems pop even more. Just a little bit of white goes a long way to accent these stems. Just think expressionistically. Think you're an impressionist in France. You're painting these stems. That's what I try to think about when I'm doing this. Helps me relax. Dry off my white here because there's a section here I got a little too courageous with my white. And you can see I'm painting it pretty loose. I want it to pop out just a bit, and I'll show you. I'll do a close-up here and I'll pick up my stems here in a minute. Or my canvas to show you the stems, I should say. There we go. Okay. Put that in there. So as you can see, there's some of that yellow, white, and green from our stems. And from afar, it definitely blends together even more so. But tell you what, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to rinse out my small brush, and I'm going to take some of my pure green, and I'm going to do something again by adding some of that pure green as well to push back some of that very bold white. Just a little bit of dark green accent my stems. Just gives it some more dimensionality, some more dimensions to our two-dimensional surface by adding in a darker green. Just think of different light areas. Where is the lighting coming from? The lighting is coming from the side. The green is going to be casted. This will be the darker side. This is the lighter side. We won't get too technical with that, but just in case you're wondering, your light source in a composition is very key. Alright, so now I'm going to put my brush into the water, winch that out, blow dry these stems. And now the cardinal rule for working with paints is typically you're going to work from dark to light. Obviously, I contradicted myself in this particular step of the stems themselves, but that was intentional. With these pink orchids, we're going to be using our pure red first to lay out the general area of where these orchids are going to be, and then we're going to slowly work from dark to light to expose the pink hue as we increase the white into our red. So, by doing this, you're going to take your medium brush, your medium chisel brush, and I want to talk for a moment about technique. So the flat of your chisel brush obviously exposes the biggest surface area of paint. As you start to twist that to get the finer chisel edge of your paintbrush, the direction becomes thinner. So for these shapes of our petals, we want to start off kind of in an oval shape first and then taper it off into a petal-like shape. So to do that, we're going to get our pure red, and I'll show you my initial technique with this. Take our pure red, a good amount there. What a fitting sound for our paint there. We're going to take our chisel brush, like I said, and I'm just going to pick a stem. And I'm going to start with these. And you'll notice with this particular composition, there are fully bloomed orchids. There are orchids that aren't bloomed. And then there's orchids that are kind of midway of blooming. So I'm going to do the buds first. These three buds at the top left-hand corner. And I'm just going to take some of my pure red first. And I'm going to think oval like an egg. And we're going to start off just by starting off that way. It's a pure red, makes it look more like a rose in a moment here. So you'll see they're kind of oval shapes here, and we'll shape them a bit more and refine them as we go along. But that's the initial step we want to do. I'm going to work down into our other orchid shape. And this one you can see is pretty much in full bloom. And we're just going to lay down where we want to our petals there. And this one crosses over on our stem. As you can see there. So there's 3 petals that are exposed here. Simple direction there. And not to worry, these will start looking more and more like orchids very, very soon. But these are the preliminary things. So third one down. We're just going to do this shape again. This one's a bit bigger. So think different various sizes of ovals. smaller, thicker. We're just going to lay these down first. And a third one like so. As you can see, fourth one down from the top of the buds, so right about here. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to make this one a bit smaller, just because I think it'll make it look more interesting. So you can see just the dollops of paint there. It's funny how the camera's picking that up from better from afar. All right, carrying on here to this orchid here. This one's in full bloom. Like I said, we're working from dark to light. It'll make it look very cool, I think. Again, a very proper term. Very cool looking orchids, I think. As you can see there, this is probably the biggest one we've done so far. This is a very petal-like shape, almost like a teardrop shape here. And I'm working small, then getting bigger, using the edge of my chisel brush to get that fine edge there, as you can see. Another oval shape. Start off with the big flat of our brush and moving to the chisel edge, as you can see there. You'll get the hang of it the more practice you have, just like anything else. There we go, as you can see there. Nice, cool looking petal, nice teardrop shape, long oval, whichever one you feel is a better representation of that. I'm going to do this orchid with the 2 petals here. If you have any questions about this technique and I'm not explaining it properly, feel free to ask in the chat if you need any specifics. I do enjoy questions because it helps me explain things better. As you can see here, I'm going to do this 2-petaled one. It's very close to the bottom of our stem here. And like I said, move that paint around to get those petals the shape you enjoy, that you best feel represents your orchid. That one's covering the stem a bit. I made an artistic creative choice. 3-petaled orchid there. I'm going to start off with this petal here. Just like so. It's not even touching the stem because I'm going to use the 3rd one here to connect it. There we go, see? And I'm using different parts of the brush. I'm dabbing, but I'm also moving around with the brush with the flat chiseled edge to get more of a textured look. Okay, another petal here. If I'm not satisfied, I just make the petal bigger. This looks like roses for now, but they don't really look like roses because roses kind of have a uniform shape. Orchids definitely bloom much differently. Stem this one out as well, using that fine point of the chisel brush. There we go. This stem here has a budding orchid, so we're just going to do kind of the shape there. We're going to keep these acrylics kind of wet. We're not going to blow dry because we want to work in the lighter pink here in a moment. Another bud here. 3-petaled orchid right here, going towards the right-hand side of our stem here. And we can define them in much more greater detail in a moment. I'm going to do the 3 budding orchids here. This is just the general shapes, you see. There's a method to my madness, although I don't think this is very mad. But I am known for doing some mad things artistically at times. Alright, so I'm going to fill that center there. There's our initial step of our orchids. First, they're very dark red, but we're going to work them to becoming pink. So without even cleaning our brush, we're going to take some of our pure white from our palette, find a clean section, and remember a good amount of white to start getting that diversity in our pink. So we're just going to move up to a lighter red with a dash of white, and we're just going to go back in there, and you'll see how easy those petals start to appear with just a bit of our white on there. You'll see just with that little bit of white and red, the highlights start to show up more. So your definition and your detail, quote unquote, of your orchids come in much nicer. See? And those general shapes that you did start to become covered up because you're trying to make that lighter red peek through. And we'll make them very pink. You just wait and see. But for now, this is our secondary step, which gets our petals a bit more into a sharper shape. Like I said, a little bit of red and a good amount of white is the best way to do this, I feel. And I'm just doing the outsides of my petals for now. We'll work into the center here in a second. Now that they're already initially laid down, it makes it much easier to work with our white, because we already know the general direction that we want this to go. Good amount of white, like I said, on that brush. And you're mixing this white and red that's already somewhat wet on your canvas to your liking. You see there? I think that looks very cool. I like painting flowers. Something about capturing or attempting to capture such articulation that Mother Nature tries to do, just to get it into your own psyche if you can. Okay, so as you can see, those orchids are starting to pop a lot more. I forgot one here now that I see it on camera. This little bud right there. Okay, so now, without even cleaning my brush again, I'm going to mix even a lighter pink. Just a good amount of white, even more so than the last time. Almost pure white. Whatever you have on your brush that's already red, just leave it. And we're just going to go back in there. And you'll see, even with a lighter white, if you need pure white, go back very quickly. Yes, there we go. Start working more from the center outward, like I said. Get some of that white in there. And as you can see, it makes it pop very much. Now the pink orchids are starting to definitely look pink. Like I said, start from the center out with our pure white. Like I said, this painterly brush movement definitely makes it look very nature-esque, I think. Not sure if nature-esque is the word, but you get the idea. Okay. Some of our pure white again. And you should still see some of that pure dark red peeking on through. And there's a pretty thick amount of white, so we really want to make sure that we blow dry this as much as we can. All right, there we go. That is starting to look quite interesting, as you can see. Much more dimensions in our petals themselves. And if you're not satisfied, simply go back with your pure white and move that pink around a bit more. It should still be fairly wet. This one I'm not quite happy with the shape. There we go, that's better. All right, so now put that brush finally back in the water, and we're going to blow dry this yet again. So the next step is we're going to do the center of our orchids, the fully bloomed orchids, in pure red. So we're going to rinse out our small brush and find some of our pure red. We're just going to take a good dollop of that red, and for the orchids that are in full bloom, simply go back and give some of that pure red on your center of your fully bloomed orchids here. And we want to make sure to capture that in the center of our petals. Like I said, the ones that you feel are a bit more in full bloom, that's to your discretion. But I believe the ones that we did all the three or two petals, I'd like to think those are pretty much in full bloom. And you'll see going back to that pure red for the center really makes it look flower-esque. Again, I don't know if flower-esque is a word, but it's my own vocabulary, I suppose. Finding those centers. If I can, I will find them, and I will indeed accent them. I think I'm going to do, there we go. All right, as you can see, and I'm actually kind of adding red into all of them now that I'm looking at my painting. I think they look really cool with that center red as well too. Just stemming again. Show again that diversity of color. As you can see, those centers are there and they really pop. And that's kind of my intention with this composition. Again, a very impressionistic approach to painting our pink orchids. And I think I want to go back in there with my small brush, and I'm going to start again with my pure red, and I'm going to pick some areas almost to accent with my pure red, just like we did with the stem. Just one single line on one direction or another of our pure red. This is kind of called a dry brush technique, or it is called a dry brush technique. Just adding in some of that dash of pure red wherever that you see fit on our petals again, just to add some more diversity of color. Just little lines here and there. Just makes it look more interesting, I think. As you can see here, the camera doesn't really read it very well. But there, I'm just trying to get at a good angle there. You can see where that red is. And whatever ones you feel need to be a bit more defined, like I'm seeing a few, I'm just going to go back in there with my light pink and move some of that out. See here? Didn't really like the way that one was looking. So I can definitely move back in there with some of that light pink. If you're not satisfied, go back in there and reshape them if you want to. You don't have to, but there's a few that I feel could use a bit more of a touch. There we are, as you see. Question. Yes, the dryer is a very good technique. Thank you so much for the comment. I very much like people engaging. But yes, like I said, the cardinal rule, generally speaking, with painting is dark to light, because you can always go lighter, but it's harder to go darker. And I think with this technique, because again, we have a pure tinting agent as our background, which is the black. So for it to pop out, we want to start working from dark to light. So we're going to do another accent here in a moment. But first, we need to blow dry, yet again, our orchids. And I think it's the impressionist in me. I have some areas that are quite thick of my acrylic paint here, and if it's so thick it's not going to dry completely, so it will dry in a few hours, but I just wanted to really kind of approach that impressionistic appeal with using a good thick amount of paint, so thicker and thinner lines, and obviously I can leave it out to dry, and like I said, it'll dry probably overnight to capture that. But it is dry enough to work on the last step, and yes, I did say last. It is a very quick painting for this evening, which is not my intention, it just simply is quite a simple, straightforward composition in the sense of one singular thing contrasting to the black. But there are minute details, as we noted throughout painting this, that the subtleties is really what makes this painting a bit of a challenge. So let's wash out our small brush again completely. Make sure it's nice and clean. And do you remember that light yellow that we mixed initially for the stems? We're going to go back into the center of our orchids and give ourselves a little bit of a yellow accent. So just 2 lines, and I'll show you. I'm going to make them kind of just in between there. That one I did too much, so I'm going to go back and fix that in a moment. But that's the beauty of working with acrylics, is they're pretty forgiving. We're just going to do a dash of yellow in the centers of our orchids here. There we go. I'm going to go back to the one I kind of messed up on. Go back to my red paint over there. There we go. And there's another one here. All right, so that may not read on the camera very well, but here you can see in the center there, there's just a little bit of yellow peeking through. And I dare say this looks better than the original. There's much more dimensionality to them. Wish you could see it in person. It looks even better in person. I'm going to do a little bit more. And like I said, with all the techniques that I just showed you, definitely feel free to go back into your composition and add in anything that you feel is appropriate. Like here, I'm going to add in some more red, just to give it a bit more that pure red as well. These are very abstract orchids, which is my intention. If anybody asks you, just tell them it's abstract, an abstract approach to Mother Nature. And I think Mother Nature is kind of abstract overall, but that's another whole philosophical discussion that maybe you can have with somebody over a glass of wine or something after you're done examining your masterpiece. So last step is we're going to rinse out our brush here, and we're going to sign this. And if there's any more questions... Oh, thank you so much, Tammy. I appreciate that. I'm glad that I'm explaining things because I like to make sure that things are as good as they can be. All right, so take some of our pure white, and I think I'm going to just make it stand out because I want to. I'm going to put my signature in the right-hand corner, just my initials. You can obviously do your full name, but my name is Cipriano. That's 4 syllables as it is, and I think that would take up too much room. Yes, so I just signed it and did the date, and I do feel that is a good approach, and I think it's, like I said, even better than the original. Just a more impressionistic approach. So as you can see here, it's a better angle. There are pink orchids for this evening. If there's any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. But the last step is, once again, we blow dry this, and we are finished for the evening. But I'll be back in a second to say goodbye proper. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Candy, for that generous compliment. Thank you very much for joining me. So yes, for the proper goodbye, I'm Cipriano Ortega, and join me once again next week, same time, same Wednesday, different week. So every Wednesday, 2 more lessons from me for this month. We'll be doing Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night next week, and that's going to be probably the most challenging of all the 4 paintings that we're doing this month. But never fear, we're going to go through it in a very practical, solid approach. And yes, I think, yes, we are done for the evening. If there's any more questions, feel free to just leave them in the chat. But thank you all so much. Oh, here's another comment here. Oh yes, well thank you once again. I'm very nice to see all the comments for this evening, and thank you once again, and hopefully next week I'll see you next week. So this is Cipriano Ortega just signing off on the World Wide Web, and I shall see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.